My name is Lottie, and at 58, life has taught me plenty about love and heartbreak. After 30 years as a nurse in Portland, Oregon, I thought I'd seen every kind of pain, but nothing prepared me for hearing my daughter Audrey tell me I was too petty to attend her wedding. The divorce from her father Jack 10 years ago was difficult enough, but when Audrey insisted his new partner William had to be at her wedding, things got complicated. I never expected setting a simple emotional boundary would cost me my place at my own daughter's wedding. If you're watching from somewhere in this big, messy world, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I transformed that heartbreak into the most unexpected journey of self-discovery. My story begins in Hillsborough, a small town just outside Portland, where I grew up with dreams of helping others. That calling led me to nursing school, where I met Jack during my second year. He was studying hospital administration with ambitious plans and a smile that could light up a room. We were young, passionate, and believed we had our whole lives figured out. After graduation, we married in a simple ceremony surrounded by friends and family. I still remember my father's toast to a lifetime of honesty and partnership. Those words would echo painfully through my mind decades later. We bought our first home in Portland, a modest 2-bedroom that we eventually expanded when I became pregnant with Audrey. Jack was so excited, he painted the nursery yellow before we even knew if we were having a boy or girl. When Audrey arrived, his face shone with a pride I'd never seen before. 3 years later, Ethan completed our family. During those early years, I worked night shifts at Portland Memorial Hospital, so Jack and I could trade off childcare responsibilities. I'd come home exhausted at dawn to find him making breakfast for the kids, and my heart would swell with gratitude for our partnership. We weren't wealthy, but we were building something meaningful together. As the children grew, I transitioned to day shifts in the emergency department. Jack's career was advancing too, with promotions that brought more responsibility and longer hours. I didn't think much of it then, attributing his late nights to dedication. We were both working toward the same goals after all: college funds for the kids, occasional family vacations, and eventually a comfortable retirement. Audrey was a bright, determined child from the start. She inherited Jack's ambition and my practicality, a combination that made her both successful and sometimes stubborn. Ethan was more laid-back, creative, finding his path through art and music rather than the structured achievements his sister pursued. Our family life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. Sunday dinners were sacred, even as the kids entered their teenage years. We navigated the usual challenges: Audrey's first heartbreak, Ethan's struggle with math, the everyday friction of family life. Through it all, Jack and I presented a united front, or so I thought. The first cracks appeared when Audrey left for college. With one child gone and another increasingly independent, the empty spaces in our marriage became more noticeable. Jack started working even later, often missing our dinner dates. When he was home, he was distracted, constantly checking his phone. I tried initiating conversations about our relationship, suggesting counseling or a vacation to reconnect. Jack would agree half-heartedly, but never follow through. I started questioning myself. Was I being too needy? Was this just what happened after 20 years of marriage? The answer came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I'd picked up an extra shift, but was sent home when patient numbers were low. I arrived to find an unfamiliar car in our driveway. Thinking Jack had a colleague over to work, I entered quietly, not wanting to interrupt. The sounds from our bedroom left no room for misinterpretation. My husband was having an affair in our bed in our home. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to move or breathe. When I finally pushed the door open, the shock that awaited wasn't just that Jack was cheating. It was that he was with William, his male colleague, whom I'd met at several hospital functions. The following days were a blur of confusion, rage, and gut-wrenching pain. Jack moved out immediately, staying with William. In our subsequent conversations, a truth emerged that shattered everything I thought I knew about our life together. Jack had always known he was gay, but had suppressed it, thinking he could build a normal life with me. 20 years of marriage suddenly felt like an elaborate lie. Every anniversary card, every intimate moment, every family decision. I questioned it all. Had any of it been real? The betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the decades of hiding such a fundamental truth. The divorce proceedings were mercifully straightforward in terms of assets, but emotionally devastating. Jack didn't contest anything, guilt perhaps making him more generous than he might have been otherwise. The hardest part was telling the children. Audrey then, in her second year of college, reacted with shock, followed quickly by anger at her father. Ethan, 16 and still at home, withdrew completely. He skipped school, locked himself in his room, and refused to see Jack for nearly 6 months. I was careful never to speak ill of their father despite my pain. "Your dad still loves you both very much," I would say. "This is about him and me, not about his feelings for you." It was perhaps the hardest thing I've ever done, protecting Jack's relationship with our children while my own heart was shattered. Gradually, a new normal emerged. Jack and William moved into an apartment downtown. Ethan slowly opened up to seeing his father initially in public places with me present, then eventually on his own. Audrey maintained contact, but kept Jack at an emotional distance. For me, rebuilding came in small steps. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the structured chaos of the emergency room. I joined a support group for divorced women, where I met Diana, who would become my closest friend. On her encouragement, I started therapy to process not just the end of my marriage, but the question marks it had placed on my entire adult life. Dating seemed impossible at first. The thought of trusting anyone felt like willingly walking back into a burning building. But eventually, at Ethan's art show, opening 3 years after the divorce, I met Robert. He was a widower with grown children, a pediatrician with kind eyes, and a quiet strength that didn't demand anything from me. Our relationship developed slowly, built on friendship and mutual respect. Robert understood grief and didn't try to rush my healing process. When I finally told him the full story of my marriage's end, he listened without judgment, then simply said, "Jack's dishonesty reflects on him, not on you." Meanwhile, Jack and William's relationship solidified. They bought a house together, merged their lives completely. William made efforts to be respectful of my position, never attending events where I would be present unless specifically invited. Jack seemed happier than I'd ever seen him, which carried its own particular sting. Had he been miserable all those years with me? As time passed, Ethan developed a surprisingly close relationship with William, who shared his interest in photography. This was difficult for me to witness, but important for Ethan's well-being, so I supported it outwardly while processing my complicated feelings in therapy. Audrey's relationship with her father remained cordial but distant. She'd graduated and launched a successful career in marketing, dating a series of ambitious men who reminded me somewhat of Jack. When she met Brandon, a financial analyst from a traditional family, I noticed how she emphasized the conventional aspects of her upbringing and minimized the divorce. 10 years after the divorce, I had created a good life for myself. I'd scaled back to part-time nursing, started volunteering with a women's health initiative, and found genuine companionship with Robert. The rawness of betrayal had faded to a dull ache that flared only occasionally. Then came Audrey's phone call about her engagement, and with it the reopening of wounds I thought had long since healed. The day Audrey called with her engagement news, I was tending to my small backyard garden, something I'd taken up after the divorce as a form of therapy. The simple act of nurturing plants, watching them grow and thrive under my care, had become a powerful metaphor for my own healing process. "Mum!" Audrey's voice burst through the phone with an excitement I hadn't heard from her in years. "Brandon proposed last night. We're getting married." My heart swelled as she described the romantic rooftop proposal, complete with string lights and her favorite champagne. Brandon had always struck me as a bit reserved, but he clearly made my daughter happy, and his steady nature seemed to balance her more impulsive tendencies. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart," I said, genuinely thrilled to hear the joy in her voice. "Have you thought about when and where?" "We're thinking next June, probably at Riverdale Gardens. Brandon's parents are pretty traditional, and they've offered to contribute significantly if we have a church ceremony and proper reception." That was my first hint that this wedding might become complicated. Brandon's parents, Harold and Margaret Miller, were wealthy, conservative, and heavily involved in their church community. I'd met them only twice, and while they were unfailingly polite, I'd sensed their subtle judgment of my divorced status. When Audrey and Brandon invited me to dinner the following week to discuss initial wedding plans, I noticed how she introduced me to the Millers. My mum Lottie is a nurse. She's dedicated her life to helping others. Nothing about being divorced. Nothing about her father. It was as if she was presenting a carefully edited version of her family. The Millers dominated the conversation with their vision for the wedding. The historic church where generations of Millers had married, the country club reception, the extensive guest list of family friends and business associates. Audrey nodded along, occasionally glancing at me as if checking my reaction. "And your father, Audrey, will he be involved in the planning?" Margaret asked with practiced casualness. Audrey hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Dad will definitely be part of the day, of course." "Wonderful," Margaret replied. "Family is so important even in complex situations." Later that evening, as Audrey and I cleaned up while Brandon drove his parents home, I broached the subject gently. "Honey, I noticed you didn't mention your dad's situation to the Millers." Audrey's shoulders tensed. "They're very traditional, Mum. I'll tell them when the time is right. Are you sure Brandon understands how important it is to be honest from the start? Marriage built on half-truths can become—" "Please don't," she interrupted sharply. "Not everyone needs to know every detail of our family drama." I backed off, recognizing the defensiveness in her tone. But the conversation left me uneasy. Audrey had always been a people-pleaser, eager for approval, and I worried about her hiding parts of herself to fit into Brandon's world. The subject came up again during a family dinner at my house where Audrey was discussing seating arrangements. Ethan had brought his girlfriend Sarah, and Robert was cooking his famous lasagna in the kitchen. "So Dad and William will obviously attend together," Audrey said casually while sketching out table plans. "I'm thinking we'll seat them with Dad's sister and her husband." My hand froze midway to my water glass. Of course I knew logically that Jack would attend our daughter's wedding, but hearing William's name included so matter-of-factly sent an unexpected jolt through me. I hadn't been in the same room with William since discovering him with Jack in our bed. I must have been quiet for too long because Audrey looked up with a frown. "Mum, is there a problem?" "No," I said automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, can we talk about this privately later?" Later that night, after everyone had left, Audrey confronted me in the kitchen. "What was that about at dinner? You looked like you'd seen a ghost when I mentioned Dad and William." I measured my words carefully. "Audrey, I understand your father will be at your wedding. That's as it should be. But William's presence would be difficult for me." Her expression hardened. "It's been 10 years, Mum. You need to move on. William is part of Dad's life now." "I have moved on," I explained. "Robert and I are happy. I've rebuilt my life. But being in a celebratory environment with the man your father left me for, that's not moving on. That's asking me to pretend the betrayal never happened." "So what are you saying? That Dad can't bring his partner to my wedding? Do you know how that would look to Brandon's family? How it would make Dad feel?" "I'm not saying he can't come," I clarified. "I'm expressing that it would be painful for me. There's a difference." Audrey shook her head dismissively. "I like William. He's been good to Dad, good to Ethan. He's a friend, and he's harmless." Harmless. The word hung in the air between us. How could I explain that a person can be kind, well-intentioned, and still represent profound pain to someone else? The conversation ended unresolved, with Audrey clearly frustrated, and me feeling increasingly anxious about the months ahead. I called Diana the next day, pouring out my concerns. "You're allowed to have boundaries, Lottie," she assured me. "Even for your daughter's wedding, especially for your daughter's wedding." But establishing those boundaries would prove more difficult than I imagined. The tension simmered beneath the surface of wedding preparations. I accompanied Audrey to a bridal salon, along with her friends and Brandon's sister Catherine. While Audrey tried on dresses, I overheard Catherine whispering to one of the bridesmaids. We're still figuring out how to handle the whole gay dad thing with my parents, she said, unaware I was within earshot. And seating will be awkward with all these broken families. I kept my expression neutral when Audrey emerged in a beautiful lace gown, smiling and offering genuine compliments. But the comment festered, reminding me that to some people, my deepest pain was just an awkward seating challenge. 2 months before the wedding, during a meeting about the rehearsal dinner, I tried once more to discuss my concerns with Audrey, this time emphasizing my feelings rather than making demands. "Sweetheart, I want your day to be perfect," I began carefully. "But I need you to understand that seeing William there will be a reminder of the most painful period of my life. It's not about being unforgiving. It's about protecting my heart." Audrey's patience had clearly worn thin. "This isn't about you, Mum. It's my wedding. Why can't you just put aside your feelings for one day?" "Because asking me to celebrate alongside the man who was part of destroying my marriage isn't a small thing," I replied, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "Would you ask someone to attend a party with the person who once hurt them deeply?" "It was 10 years ago," Audrey exclaimed. "Dad has moved on. William has moved on. Why can't you—" "Moving on doesn't mean pretending it never happened," I tried to explain. "It doesn't mean forcing myself into situations that reopen old wounds." "You're being petty," she said, the word hitting me like a slap. "Selfish and petty. Dad isn't making this kind of drama. Your father doesn't have to see his replacement at this wedding." I responded immediately, regretting my choice of words. Audrey's eyes narrowed. "His replacement Robert is coming, isn't he? How is that different?" "Robert wasn't having an affair with me while I was married to your father. Robert didn't shatter 20 years of what I thought was a loving marriage." My voice broke despite my efforts to stay calm. "Either you come and be civil with William or don't come at all," Audrey said, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Those are the options." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm your mother, Audrey. I've supported you through everything. I'm simply asking for some understanding about a genuine pain. And I'm the bride. This is my day with the family I choose to have there." She gathered her purse, standing abruptly. "I guess you give me no other option than to cancel your invitation." The words hung in the air between us, shocking us both. For a moment I thought she might take them back, but her expression hardened pride, overriding any second thoughts. I couldn't find words to respond. With a dignity I didn't entirely feel, I gathered my things and left without another word. The drive home passed in a blur, tears finally coming once I was safely inside my house, away from judging eyes. I tried calling Audrey that evening, then the next morning. Both calls went to voicemail. On the third day, a text message appeared. "I think it's best if you don't attend the wedding. I'll have someone collect your mother of the bride dress for alterations to fit Catherine's mother. Brandon's family is being very understanding about the situation." The finality of it sent me into a tailspin. I'd lived through divorce, betrayal, rebuilding my entire life. But being denied the chance to see my only daughter marry felt like a uniquely cruel punishment for setting a simple boundary. Ethan called that weekend, his voice tight with concern. "Mum, is it true Audrey says you're not coming to the wedding because of William?" I explained the situation as objectively as I could, careful not to villainize his sister. "It was Audrey's decision to rescind my invitation," I concluded. "I simply expressed discomfort." "This is insane," he said. "Do you want me to talk to her?" "No, honey. Your relationship with your sister is important. Don't put yourself in the middle of this." I meant it sincerely, despite the temptation to have an advocate. "Just be there for her on her day." Robert was my rock during those awful first days, bringing dinner when I couldn't summon the energy to cook, listening without judgment as I cycled through grief, anger, and bewilderment. "Whatever you need," he told me, "I'm here. If you want to fight this, I'll support you. If you need to accept it and find a way forward, I'll help with that too." I didn't know then what I needed, only that something precious had been lost, and I wasn't sure how to find my way back to solid ground. The weeks following Audrey's decision were among the most difficult of my life. I moved through my shifts at the hospital like a ghost going through motions I could perform from muscle memory alone. My colleagues noticed the change, but respected my brief explanation that there were family issues I was working through. Night after night, I lay awake replaying the confrontation with Audrey, wondering if I could have expressed myself differently, if I had somehow failed as a mother to instill enough empathy in my daughter that she could understand my position. The what-ifs became a torturous loop. What if I had simply agreed to endure William's presence? What if I had never mentioned my discomfort? What if I had pretended for just one day that seeing them together didn't reopen a wound that had taken years to heal? 3 days after our fight, Jack called. His voice was hesitant, uncomfortable. "Lottie, I just talked to Audrey. She told me what happened." I braced myself for accusations for him to tell me I was being unreasonable. Instead, he sighed heavily. "This is complicated for everyone." "Are you still bringing William?" I asked, trying to keep bitterness from my voice. A pause. "He's my partner, Lottie. We've been together for 10 years. So that's a yes." "I feel caught in the middle here," Jack admitted. "Part of me feels guilty that my choices are causing this rift between you and Audrey, but I can't not bring William. That would send a message to our kids that I'm ashamed of who I am, of our relationship." The irony wasn't lost on me, that Jack's authenticity required my discomfort, while my boundary setting was labelled selfish. "Everyone gets to prioritize their needs except me," I said quietly. "I'm just expected to smile through the pain." "That's not fair," Jack protested. "No one wants you to be in pain. But no one is willing to acknowledge it either." I took a deep breath. "It's fine, Jack. Audrey has made her decision. You'll all have a lovely day without the complication of my feelings." After hanging up, I called in sick to work for the first time in years, unable to face the effort of pretending I was okay. I spent the day in bed alternating between tears and a hollow emptiness that frightened me more than the sadness. Diana came over that evening, armed with wine and a fierce protectiveness that finally broke through my numbness. "This is absolutely outrageous," she declared, pacing my living room. "After everything you've done for that girl, after how carefully you protected her relationship with Jack despite what he did to you." "Maybe I've been too accommodating," I said softly. "Maybe I should have been more honest about my pain over the years." Diana sat beside me, taking my hands. "Listen to me, Lottie. You have been a model of grace through an impossible situation. You're not asking for anything unreasonable. You're not telling Audrey that William can't come. You're simply saying it would be painful for you." "But what do I do now?" The question had been haunting me. Do I beg to be included? Do I accept that I'll miss my only daughter's wedding? Diana's response surprised me. What if this isn't just a loss? What if it's also an opening? An opening to what, I asked, confused? To something different than what you had planned. She refilled our wine glasses. "If you're not at the wedding, what would you do instead? If you were completely free of obligation that day, what would bring you peace or joy or meaning?" The question felt almost sacrilegious. How could I think about finding joy on a day when my daughter was marrying without me? But as the evening wore on, the seed Diana had planted began to take root. If I couldn't change Audrey's mind, and it was becoming clear that her pride and Brandon's family's influence made that unlikely, then perhaps I did need to consider alternatives. The next day, I had a scheduled therapy session that became pivotal. After explaining the situation, my therapist asked thoughtfully, "What does honoring yourself look like in this scenario, Lottie?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've spent so long trying to be the bigger person, to never speak ill of Jack to the kids, to support their relationships with him despite my pain. I don't know how to prioritize myself when it comes to family." "That's very common for mothers," she replied. "But consider this: by respecting Audrey's choice, painful as it is, you're actually modeling something important, that healthy boundaries go both ways. She's setting one with you, albeit harshly. You can choose how to respond to that boundary with your own integrity intact." You're saying I should just accept not being at my daughter's wedding? My voice cracked on the words. I'm saying that fighting her decision might reinforce the dynamic that your needs come second to everyone else's. What if instead you said, I honor your choice, and I'm going to honor myself by finding meaning elsewhere on that day? The conversation continued for our full hour, exploring the complicated terrain of maternal sacrifice versus self-respect. I left feeling raw, but with a newfound clarity. If I couldn't be at Audrey's wedding, I needed to find a way to make that day meaningful, rather than just enduring it as a victim of exclusion. That evening, Robert came over with dinner. As we ate on my back porch watching the sunset, he mentioned tentatively, "Remember that medical volunteer trip to Guatemala we talked about last year, the one we postponed because of Audrey's engagement?" I nodded, the memory hazy through my current grief. We had been interested in a program that sent medical professionals to remote villages for short-term clinics. They just sent out an email about last-minute openings for a June session, Robert continued carefully. It starts the week of the wedding. My first instinct was to dismiss the idea. It felt wrong to be planning something else, as if I were giving up on reconciliation with Audrey. "I can't just run away," I protested. "Is it running away to do meaningful work?" Robert asked gently. "Or is it finding purpose in a situation you didn't choose?" The question lingered with me after he left. That night, instead of lying awake rehearsing painful conversations with Audrey, I found myself researching the Guatemala program on my laptop. The organization needed experienced nurses for a 2-week clinic serving indigenous communities with limited healthcare access. The work would be challenging, the conditions basic, the impact potentially significant. For the first time since Audrey's ultimatum, I felt a flicker of something other than grief, a quiet curiosity, maybe even hope. Not that this would replace being at my daughter's wedding, but that perhaps there was a way to transform the day into something besides loss. The next morning I called Diana. "I think I might apply for this medical volunteer program," I told her. "It's probably a long shot with such short notice, but—" "Do it," she interrupted firmly. "Apply today." I did, sending my nursing credentials and a hastily written personal statement explaining my interest. Then I tried my best to put it out of my mind, not wanting to invest too much hope in an unlikely acceptance. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The program coordinator, Dr. Elena Vasquez, was calling to discuss my application personally. "We rarely get applicants with 30 years of emergency nursing experience," she explained. "Your skills would be invaluable, particularly your trauma experience. We have limited resources in our village clinics, and experienced nurses who can make quick decisions are essential." We talked for nearly an hour about the program details, the villages they served, the common medical issues they encountered, the living conditions, basic but safe, the team composition. By the end of the call, Dr. Vasquez had offered me a position on the team departing June 10th, 3 days before Audrey's wedding. "Can I think about it overnight?" I asked, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of making such a significant decision. "Of course," she replied, "but we do need to confirm soon to arrange travel and orientation." That evening I sat in my garden with a cup of tea, truly contemplating the choice before me. If I accepted the position, I would be thousands of miles away when Audrey married. While that distance might protect me from acutely feeling my exclusion, it also meant there was no possibility of last-minute reconciliation. Was I ready to close that door completely? I called Ethan, needing to hear his perspective. After explaining the Guatemala opportunity, I asked honestly, would I be giving up too easily on being part of Audrey's day if I do this? There was a long pause before he answered. "Mum, I've tried talking to Audrey 3 times about this. She's not budging. I think you need to protect yourself here. If Guatemala would give you purpose during a really hard time, you should go." His permission, though I hadn't consciously been seeking it, released something in me. The next morning I called Dr. Vasquez and accepted the position. As soon as I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The decision was made. I would not be at my daughter's wedding, but I would be serving others using my skills to make a difference. It wasn't what I had ever imagined for myself on that day, but it offered a path forward with dignity. Of course, making the decision was just the beginning. Now I had to prepare, medically, logistically, emotionally, for a journey that would take me far from everything familiar at a time when my heart was already aching with loss. The weeks following my decision to join the Guatemala medical mission flew by in a blur of preparations. I needed vaccinations, a passport renewal, appropriate clothing for the tropical climate, and a crash course in medical Spanish. Robert offered to join me for the second week of the program, which would include the actual wedding day, and I gratefully accepted, knowing his steady presence would be a comfort. Meanwhile, I continued trying to process what was happening with Audrey. I sent her a brief, heartfelt email explaining that while I respected her decision about the wedding, I remained open to talking whenever she was ready. There was no response. Ethan kept me updated with minimal details, clearly trying to balance his relationships with both his sister and me. The rehearsal dinner venue changed, he mentioned during a phone call. The bridesmaids' dresses are burgundy now instead of navy. Normal wedding planning developments, but each one a small reminder of what I was missing. About a month before the wedding, I received an unexpected call from Margaret Miller Brandon's mother. "Lottie, I'm finalizing some details for the bridal shower next weekend, and I wanted to confirm you'll be attending," she said with practiced politeness. My stomach dropped. Clearly Audrey hadn't shared our situation with her future in-laws. "I'm sorry, Margaret, but I won't be at the shower." "Oh." Her surprise seemed genuine. "Is there a scheduling conflict? We could perhaps move it if—" "That's very kind," I interrupted gently. "But the issue is more complicated. I actually won't be attending the wedding either." A shocked silence followed. "I don't understand," Margaret finally said. "You're the mother of the bride." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "There's been a disagreement about guest arrangements. Audrey has made her wishes clear, and I'm respecting her decision." "But that's absurd. What could possibly—" She stopped herself, apparently remembering her proper manners. "I apologize, this is not my business. But Lottie, surely this can be resolved. Family should be together for such important occasions." The irony of Margaret Miller with her traditional family values advocating for my inclusion, while unaware of the full situation, was not lost on me. I simply responded, "I appreciate your concern, Margaret. If you could please let the shower hostess know I won't be attending, I'd be grateful." After hanging up, I wondered how Audrey would explain my absence to the Millers. Would she tell them the truth about Jack and William about her ultimatum? Or would she create a more palatable story that preserved her image with her conservative future in-laws? The question was partly answered 2 days later, when I received a formal wedding invitation in the mail, a duplicate of the one I'd already received months earlier. Attached was a handwritten note from Margaret. "Lottie, there must be some misunderstanding. Of course you should be at your daughter's wedding. Brandon and I insist." She'd signed it with her full name and included her phone number. I placed the invitation on my mantel without responding. It seemed Audrey had not shared the real situation, and I had no intention of revealing family matters to her future mother-in-law against her wishes, despite the temptation to have an ally. As the wedding date grew closer, my nursing colleagues organized a small goodbye gathering for me. They presented me with thoughtful travel items: a lightweight medical bag, high-quality hiking socks, a solar phone charger. Many of them had known me throughout my divorce and had witnessed my careful rebuilding of life afterward. Their support meant more than they could know. To Lottie, my supervisor Maria toasted, "whose compassion extends from Portland to Guatemala. Those villagers are lucky to have you, just as we've been lucky all these years." The warmth of community wrapped around me that evening, reminding me that family takes many forms. While the absence of my daughter on her wedding day would always be a profound sadness, I was not without love or purpose. 1 week before my departure, I made one final attempt to reach Audrey. I wrote her a letter, not arguing my position or trying to change her mind, but expressing my unconditional love and my hopes for her happiness. I explained my plans for Guatemala without any hint of accusation or martyrdom. I enclosed a small blue handkerchief that had belonged to my grandmother, which I had always planned to give Audrey on her wedding day as her something blue. I ended the letter with words that came from the deepest part of my heart. No matter where I am physically on your wedding day, a piece of my heart will be with you. I will always be your mother, and my love doesn't depend on your choices or whether we agree. I hope someday we can find our way back to understanding each other. I mailed the letter with no expectation of response. 3 days before my flight, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a carefully packed box containing Audrey's childhood keepsakes that I had stored for her. Her first ballet shoes school awards, the mother-daughter journal we had kept when she was young. There was no note, just the items returned to me as if a chapter was closing. The gesture felt final, a clear message that Audrey was moving forward without these connections to her past. I allowed myself one evening of grief, sitting on my bedroom floor, surrounded by these precious mementos, remembering the little girl who had once looked at me with complete trust and love. The night before my early morning flight, Robert came over with dinner. We sat on my back porch watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk, discussing last-minute travel details and the cases we might encounter in the rural clinics. Deliberately not discussing the wedding that would take place while we were gone. "Are you okay?" Robert asked finally, the question encompassing far more than he put into words. I considered my answer carefully. "No," I admitted. "I'm heartbroken about Audrey. I probably always will be to some degree. But I'm also, I don't know if okay is the right word, but I'm moving forward with purpose. And right now, that has to be enough." He took my hand, his warm fingers intertwining with mine. "You're the strongest person I know, Lottie. Not because you don't feel the pain, but because you don't let it stop you from doing what matters." As we sat in companionable silence watching night fall on my garden, I realized this was the truest form of support. Not false reassurances that everything would be fine, but acknowledgement of the difficulty alongside faith in my capacity to carry it. Early the next morning, I zipped my carefully packed suitcase, checked my passport and medications one final time, and called a rideshare to the airport. As we pulled away from my house, I allowed myself one backward glance at the home where I had raised my children, where I had rebuilt my life after divorce, where I had learned painful but necessary lessons about boundaries and self-respect. Then I turned to face forward toward an unexpected journey that had emerged from heartbreak, but might yet contain its own form of healing. Dawn was breaking as my flight took off from Portland International Airport. From my window seat, I watched the familiar landscape of my life grow smaller, then disappear beneath a blanket of clouds. There was something symbolic about physically removing myself from the place where my heart had been broken first by Jack, and now by Audrey's rejection. The journey to Guatemala City was long, a connection through Houston, then the international flight south. I tried to focus on reviewing my medical Spanish phrasebook and the briefing materials Dr. Vasquez had sent, but my mind kept drifting to what would be happening in Portland 3 days from now. The rehearsal dinner I wouldn't attend. The moment Audrey would walk down the aisle without me watching. The mother-daughter dance that would never happen. Each thought was a small, sharp pain. I practiced what my therapist had taught me, acknowledging the feeling without judgment, then gently returning to the present moment. The hum of the airplane engines, the taste of surprisingly decent coffee, the excitement of the young couple across the aisle, clearly headed on vacation, their faces bright with anticipation. Guatemala City was an assault on the senses after the long flight, crowded, colorful, chaotic. Dr. Vasquez met me and 2 other volunteers at the airport, her efficient manner immediately reassuring. We would spend one night in the city for orientation before traveling to the remote village where our first clinic would be established. "The conditions will be basic," she warned us as we drove to a modest hotel. Intermittent electricity, limited running water, sleeping on cots in the local school building. The work is challenging, but incredibly rewarding. That evening, I met the rest of the team. 3 doctors, 5 other nurses, a dentist, a pharmacist, and 2 logistics coordinators who would handle everything from equipment to translation. They came from across the United States and Canada, ranging in age from a new nursing graduate in her 20s to a retired surgeon in his 70s. As we shared a simple dinner and introduced ourselves, I was struck by the common thread of purpose that had brought this diverse group together. When my turn came, I spoke only of my nursing background and interest in international service, keeping my personal circumstances private. This wasn't about escaping my pain. It was about channeling it into something meaningful. The next morning, we loaded into 2 rugged vans for the journey to Aldea San Miguel, a village in the mountainous region several hours from the capital. The drive was beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Lush green landscapes and breathtaking vistas alongside hairpin turns on narrow dirt roads that seemed to cling precariously to the mountainsides. By late afternoon, we arrived at our destination. The village consisted of perhaps 100 modest homes clustered around a central plaza with a small church and school building. Children ran alongside our vans, waving excitedly, while adults regarded us with a mixture of curiosity and reserved gratitude. We were welcomed by the village elder and the local health worker, a woman named Consuela, who had basic medical training but limited resources. Through a translator, she explained the community's most pressing health needs: untreated chronic conditions like hypertension and diabetes, children with respiratory infections, women needing prenatal care, numerous preventable conditions exacerbated by poverty and limited healthcare access. That evening, as we set up our sleeping quarters in the school classrooms and organized our medical supplies, I felt a strange sense of rightness. The personal drama that had consumed me in Portland seemed both very far away and somehow less overwhelming in this context of genuine need. We began work at sunrise the next day, transforming the school's largest classroom into a makeshift clinic. My emergency nursing skills proved immediately valuable as we established triage protocols, created stations for different services, and prepared for the influx of patients. And they came, dozens, then hundreds over the days that followed. Elderly men with untreated heart conditions, young mothers carrying infants with fevers, children needing vaccines and dental care. Working with limited equipment and medication, we provided what treatment we could and created follow-up plans for the most serious cases. The work was exhausting, but deeply satisfying. For 12 to 14 hours each day, I was completely present, focused on the needs before me, rather than my own pain. Each night I collapsed onto my cot, physically drained, but with a sense of purpose that had been missing in the weeks following Audrey's decision. On what would have been Audrey's wedding eve, I checked my phone for the first time in days, having finally found a spot with reliable signal. There was a text from Ethan. "Rehearsal went fine. Thinking of you, Mom. Hope Guatemala is amazing." The simple message brought tears to my eyes, not just for what I was missing, but for my son's thoughtfulness in keeping me connected despite the complicated family dynamics. I sent back a brief reply with a photo of the village children who had adopted me as a special friend, telling him I was doing meaningful work and sending love to everyone. That night I lit a small candle in the window of our makeshift dormitory. A private ritual, a silent blessing sent across thousands of miles to my daughter on the eve of her new life. Whatever had happened between us, my love remained unchanged. The actual wedding day dawned with unexpected clarity for me. While a part of my heart was indeed in Portland, my body and mind were fully present in Guatemala, focused on the clinic we had established and the patients who needed care. That morning, a young woman arrived in active labor, her baby coming weeks earlier than expected. With Dr. Vasquez leading and me assisting, we delivered a healthy baby girl in our basic clinic setting, using skills and instincts honed through decades of nursing. When the exhausted mother asked through the translator what my name was, I told her Lottie, and she smiled, saying something in her local dialect. "She says her daughter will be called Carlota in your honor," the translator explained. "It is the Spanish version of your name." The unexpected gift of this connection, of life continuing, of being useful in a moment of another woman's transformation, felt like a balm to my soul. As I carefully wrapped the newborn and placed her in her mother's arms, I thought about cycles of life, about how pain and joy often exist side by side, about how we find meaning in the most unexpected places. That evening, Robert arrived as planned for the second week of the program. His familiar presence was comforting as he joined our team, quickly integrating his pediatric skills into the clinic workflow. When we finally had a moment alone, he simply hugged me and asked, "How are you really?" "I'm okay," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. There's been no miraculous healing. I still feel the absence. But being here doing this work, it's helping me remember who I am beyond being Audrey's mother. He nodded understanding without need for further explanation. We sat together on a bench outside the school as the sun set over the mountains, the village children playing nearby, the sounds of everyday life continuing around us. "Ethan texted earlier," I told him. "The wedding happened. Life goes on." "Yes," Robert agreed quietly. "Life always does." The second week in Guatemala passed quickly with Robert's presence, adding both practical support and emotional comfort. We expanded our clinic to visit a neighboring village, hiking 2 hours each way with portable medical supplies. The work remained challenging but deeply rewarding. On our final weekend before returning to the United States, the program coordinator arranged for those who wished to visit the ancient Mayan ruins at Tikal. Standing among the temples that had endured for centuries, I gained a perspective that had been difficult to access in the immediate pain of Audrey's rejection. Civilizations rose and fell. Families changed shape across generations. No emotion, no situation was permanent, not even the most profound grief. What endured were the connections we created, the care we offered, the ways we found to make meaning from both joy and suffering. As our 2 weeks came to a close, Dr. Vasquez approached me with an unexpected question. "We have another team arriving next week, but we're short a senior nurse. Any chance you could extend your stay for another 7 days? We would cover the change in your flight arrangements, of course." I looked at Robert, who immediately said, "I can handle things at home if you want to stay. This seems to be good for you." The decision wasn't difficult. I called the hospital in Portland and arranged an extension of my leave. Something about this place, this work, was helping me heal in ways I hadn't anticipated. 1 more week felt like a gift rather than an obligation. Robert departed with the main group while I remained behind to welcome the new team. As we said goodbye, he held me close and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Lottie. For all of it. The boundaries you set, the dignity you've maintained, the way you've transformed pain into purpose." His words stayed with me as I continued my unexpected journey, one that had begun in rejection, but was somehow leading me toward a new understanding of myself and my capacity for resilience. My extended time in Guatemala passed with a rhythm that became almost meditative. The early morning preparations for clinic, the steady flow of patients throughout the day, the quiet evenings spent in conversation with fellow volunteers, or in reflection under star-filled skies, unlike anything visible from Portland. I formed a particular bond with Sophia, a Guatemalan nurse who worked as our primary interpreter. In her mid-40s, Sophia had her own story of family estrangement, a brother who had cut ties after a dispute over their parents' care, leaving her to shoulder the responsibility alone. "Sometimes the hardest wounds to heal are those inflicted by the people we love most," she told me one evening as we organized supplies for the next day's clinic. "But time has a way of shifting perspectives." "Has your brother ever reached out to reconcile?" I asked, thinking of Audrey. Sophia's smile was bittersweet. "After 7 years, yes. When his daughter was born, something changed for him. Not everything was repaired overnight, but we found a new way to be family." Her story offered a glimmer of hope that I held close during moments of sadness. Perhaps someday something would shift for Audrey too. During my final days in Guatemala, we delivered another baby, treated countless infections, managed chronic conditions with limited resources, and conducted health education workshops for the community. Each interaction reinforced what I had always known as a nurse, but somehow needed to relearn in this context, that healing is never just physical, and that connection is as essential to well-being as medicine. The farewell ceremony organized by the village elders was unexpectedly moving. Through a translator, they expressed gratitude for our service and presented each of us with a small hand-woven textile as a remembrance. The mother of baby Carlotta approached me shyly, placing her now 3-week-old daughter in my arms for a moment of blessing. As I held this tiny namesake, I thought about legacy, about the ripples we create that extend far beyond our immediate circles. Whatever had happened with Audrey, whatever might happen in the future, nothing could erase the impact of the care I had offered throughout my life, as a nurse, as a mother, as a human being connected to others in this complicated world. The journey home felt different from the outward trip. I was returning physically exhausted, but spiritually lighter, with a perspective that had been impossible to achieve in the immediate aftermath of Audrey's rejection. 3 weeks of purposeful work in a community where needs were immediate and gratitude was expressed openly had reminded me of my value beyond family roles and relationships. Portland welcomed me back with familiar summer rain, a gentle homecoming that matched my contemplative mood. My house felt both strange and comforting after the basic conditions of Guatemala. Robert had kept my garden tended and left a simple meal in the refrigerator with a note, "Welcome home, brave heart. Call when you're ready. No rush." That first evening back, I simply rested, adjusting to the quiet and privacy after weeks of communal living. I unpacked my bags, placing the woven textile from Guatemala and a photo of baby Carlotta and her mother on my bedside table, tangible reminders of the unexpected journey that had helped begin my healing. The next morning, I checked my phone to find several messages from Ethan asking when I'd return. I called him immediately. "Mom." His relief was evident. "You're back. I've been trying to reach you." "I extended my stay by a week," I explained. "The cell service was very limited. Is everything okay?" A pause. "Yes and no. Yes, and..." "The wedding went fine, but Audrey and Brandon had some issues on their honeymoon. Apparently, Brandon's parents invited her ex-boyfriend to the wedding without telling either of them. She only found out when someone mentioned seeing him there." The irony of this boundary violation by the very in-laws who had influenced Audrey's decision about my attendance wasn't lost on me. "Is she okay?" "She's upset. Says she feels betrayed that they would do that behind her back." Ethan's tone suggested he recognized the parallel to my situation as well. "They cut the honeymoon short and came home early." "That's unfortunate," I said carefully, not wanting to express any satisfaction at Audrey's predicament, despite the obvious similarity. "Yeah. Look, I know things are complicated right now, but I'd like to come by and see you. I've got something to show you." We arranged for him to visit that afternoon. When he arrived, he was carrying a large envelope that I recognized as containing wedding photos. My heart constricted at the sight. "Ethan, I don't know if I'm ready to..." "I think you should see these, Mom," he said gently. "Not to hurt you, but because it's your daughter's wedding. Despite everything, I know you care." Reluctantly, I agreed to look. We sat at my kitchen table as Ethan carefully laid out professional photographs capturing moments I had missed. Audrey in her wedding dress, the ceremony, the reception. I braced myself for the pain of exclusion, but what struck me most was how strained Audrey looked in many of the images, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "She asked about you, you know," Ethan said quietly as I studied a group photo. During the reception, I told her about Guatemala. I looked up, surprised. "What did she say?" "Not much, just nodded. But I could tell she was thinking about it." He hesitated. "Dad was uncomfortable the whole time. He and William left early right after dinner." "Did William cause problems?" Despite everything, I didn't wish conflict for Jack. "No, nothing like that. William actually suggested they not attend to reduce tension, but Dad insisted. I think he just felt caught in the middle of everything." Ethan gathered the photos, sliding them back into the envelope. Brandon's parents were overbearing throughout the whole thing. Now with this ex-boyfriend situation, Audrey's seeing a different side of them. I nodded, processing this information without comment. Whatever issues Audrey was having with her in-laws, I wouldn't take satisfaction in them. Family dynamics were complicated enough without adding schadenfreude to the mix. The weeks that followed brought a gradual return to routine, though, with meaningful changes inspired by my time in Guatemala. I contacted a local free clinic serving immigrant communities and began volunteering 1 day a week, using my newly improved Spanish skills. I joined a support group for parents experiencing estrangement from adult children, finding comfort in shared experiences and strategies for maintaining emotional health while leaving the door open for reconciliation. Robert and I deepened our relationship, planning another trip to Guatemala the following year. My nursing colleagues welcomed me back with genuine interest in my experiences abroad, several expressing interest in joining future medical missions. Life continued as it always does, with or without our permission. I found moments of joy and purpose that coexisted alongside the lingering sadness of the rupture with Audrey. I wrote her occasional brief emails sharing positive news without expectation of response, a way of maintaining connection without pressure. 3 months after the wedding, my phone rang with Audrey's name on the display. My heart raced as I answered. "Hi, Mum." Her voice sounded tentative, almost shy. "I was wondering if maybe we could meet for coffee sometime this week." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, Audrey was already seated at an outdoor table, nervously shredding a napkin. She looked up as I approached, her expression a complicated mixture of emotions. "You look well," she said as I sat down. "Different somehow." "Guatemala changed me in ways I didn't expect," I replied simply. The conversation that followed was awkward, halting, neither of us quite knowing how to bridge the chasm that had formed between us. We spoke of safe topics initially: her job, my volunteer work, the unusually warm weather. Gradually, as our coffees cooled, we edged toward the elephant in the room. "I heard about the situation with Brandon's parents and your ex," I said carefully. "That must have been difficult." Audrey's expression tightened. "It was a complete violation of trust. They knew exactly what they were doing, inviting him without telling us. Just like they knew what they were doing when they pressured us about everything else." I nodded, listening without comment. "It made me think," she continued, staring into her cup, "about boundaries and respect, about people making decisions that affect you without considering your feelings." The parallel hung unspoken between us. "I handled things badly, Mum," she finally said, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away. "With the wedding. I was so focused on creating this perfect image for Brandon's family that I lost sight of a lot of things." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening the photo gallery. "Would you like to see some pictures from Guatemala?" The shifting conversation seemed to release some of the tension. Audrey leaned forward as I showed her images of the village, the clinic, the children who had become my friends. When I reached the photo of baby Carlotta, I explained how she had been named after me, watching Audrey's face soften with genuine interest. "You did something amazing with that time," she said quietly. "Something meaningful." "It wasn't what I had planned for your wedding day," I admitted. "But yes, it became meaningful in ways I couldn't have anticipated." We parted with a brief, slightly awkward hug and a tentative plan to meet again the following month. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall that had formed between us. That opening widened gradually over the following months. Coffee meetings became occasional dinners. Audrey began sharing more about her life with Brandon, including their challenges adjusting to marriage and navigating the aftermath of the in-law situation. I listened without judgment, offering support without advice unless asked directly. 6 months after our first post-wedding meeting, Audrey suggested a holiday gathering at her home, a dinner that would include Jack and William Ethan and his girlfriend Robert and me, the very grouping I had once found unthinkable. "Are you sure?" I asked when she proposed it. "That's a lot of potentially awkward dynamics in one room." "I'm sure," she said with newfound confidence. "We're all adults. We all care about each other in different ways. It's time to try something new." The dinner was indeed tense at times, with careful conversation and occasional strained silences. But there were also moments of genuine warmth. William complimenting my Guatemala photos, Jack asking thoughtful questions about the medical work there, Robert sharing stories that made everyone laugh. We were a strange, imperfect family constellation, but we were trying. As winter turned to spring, Audrey called with news that shifted everything once again. "Mom," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness, "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby in November." The announcement brought fresh tears, happy ones this time. Whatever had happened between us, life was continuing, creating new connections, new possibilities for love and healing. "I want my child to know their grandmother," Audrey said softly near the end of our call. "The real you, not some story or absence." "I want that too," I replied, emotion making my voice unsteady. "Very much." As I prepared for a second medical mission to Guatemala with Robert, this time planned months in advance rather than as an escape, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The painful exclusion from Audrey's wedding had opened doors I might never have approached otherwise, to service work that utilized my skills in new ways, to deeper understanding of myself, beyond family roles, to a relationship with Robert built on mutual respect and shared purpose. The wound of missing my daughter's wedding would always be there, a tender spot in my heart. But around that wound, healing had occurred in unexpected ways. Audrey and I were building a new relationship based on adult understanding rather than roles and expectations. I had discovered capacities for resilience and growth I might never have known otherwise. Standing in my garden on a spring evening, watching new growth emerge from soil that had lain dormant through winter, I thought about life's unexpected turns. How doors that close can lead to windows opening elsewhere. How loss can become, with time and intention, a pathway to discovery. How boundaries, painful as they may be to establish and maintain, can ultimately create healthier relationships than endless accommodation. I thought of baby Carlota in Guatemala, who would be nearly a year old now. Of my own grandchild growing within Audrey, continuing our family story in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Of Sophia's wisdom about family estrangements, that time shifts perspectives in ways we can't force or predict. The path forward wasn't perfect or without its rough spots. Audrey and I still had moments of tension still needed to rebuild trust gradually. But we were both committed to the process, both willing to acknowledge mistakes and find new ways to connect. Perhaps that was the truest lesson of this difficult journey, that love means allowing others their own path while honoring your own, that healing comes not from erasing pain, but from transforming it into wisdom, and that sometimes our deepest wounds can lead us to our most authentic strength. Have you ever faced rejection from someone you love deeply? How did you find your way forward? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most painful experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more tales of healing and transformation. And don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that even our deepest heartbreaks can lead to unexpected blessings. Thank you for walking this journey with me. And remember, the end of one chapter is simply the beginning of another.